Our entire system of education is based on a British model. The British were not interested in making us better people. Otherwise, they would not have colonized us. Colonizing somebody is not about helping them, it's about helping yourself. Our educational system was based upon someone else's interests.
And the British made this very clear, that the only way to conquer the Africans is to destroy their access to their indigenous culture.
How did they destroy that? How did they do that?
Just once they come in with their guns, they empower. But they say, "Oh, Kwabena, you want to go to school? You want to learn science?" And
did you know that the British government still owns mines and shares in most of the companies of the countries that were colonized by them? On today's episode, we're talking about 5 African countries that were colonized by the British, and if the British still have their hold on these countries. When we talk about the British government, they don't just show up in your country. They were able to pull 16 different nations, different tribes, different languages, different cultures, and put them under one flag.
Your mind keeps you from being genocided. When someone takes control, and the British made this very clear, that the only way to conquer the Africans is to destroy their access to their indigenous culture. Once they come in with their guns, they empower. But they say, "Oh, Kwabena, you want to go to school? You want to learn science and technology and mathematics? Well, that's fine, but you can't be Kwabena anymore. You got to be John."
Okay.
So you leave Kwabena behind.
Pure Vibe says, same policy is implemented in Afghanistan. Current government is keeping the population in darkness. Dominic Soro says, mental slavery is the worst form of colonization. The most potent tool in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The British understood this theory before colonizing them. The British called Ghana the Gold Coast, and to them, it was just a vault, not even a country. But look at Ghana today. Even through their president, Ghana's economy is still very tied to that of British. Most of the gold minings are done by foreigners. When I say foreigners, I mean the British. They are keeping Ghana in a diplomatic orbit.
How did abolishing the slave trade help the British colonize us? British quickly became a global superpower with an industrialized economy, a huge navy, and more colonies. When they abolished the slave trade in 1807 and used their navy to stop other Europeans from taking part in the trade, their economy was strong enough that they could obviously survive without it. That was not true for the rest. They were so dependent on the slave trade that without it, they could barely afford to run their forts and castles. Now, over time, they started to leave. And by 1872, the Dutch were the last remaining Europeans left and handed over their Gold Coast territory to the British.
Meanwhile, in Kenya, the British did not only want their resources, they wanted to live in their lands. They wanted to take over the lands of Kenyans. And this act pushed them into poverty. But take a look at Kenya today. The country is navigating. The thing is, the massive creditors of this country, Kenya, are still the Western system. The painful part is, most of the lands are still owned by the British multinationals. Whenever the King of England visits Kenya, he offers his heartfelt sorrow for how they were treated. But he never returns the lands. That's how the grip in Kenya has remained for years.
Britain ran torture camps in Kenya in the 1950s. And the part that gets me is this isn't obscure history. This isn't ancient. This happened while some of our grandparents were alive, even in our parents' lifetime. And nobody taught us. So here's what was happening. Kenya was under British rule. And rule sounds clean until you look closer. Land was taken, movement was restricted. Kenyans were forced to work land that used to belong to them. Meanwhile, the colonizers got farms, security, and legal protection. Black Kenyans got passes, curfews, and punishment. And after a while, people said no. That resistance became known as the Mau Mau Uprising. And let me be clear, this wasn't chaos. It was people trying to get their land back, their dignity back, their lives back.
Their strategic prize was Egypt. Their main point of focus in Egypt was the Suez Canal. They wanted the Suez Canal because that was their shortcut to them exporting and importing goods out of Africa. They treated Egypt like a military base. But look at today. President Abdel Fattah has a very great link with the Western system. When the Egyptians were finally able to move the British men out of their country, they left footprints.
We're going to start scrambling, looking for funding for the other half of the dam. We're so glad you're still on board. And Eisenhower goes, no, if Britain isn't going to do it, we're not going to do it. Sorry. Can't build half a dam. Nasser goes, what are my options? What are my options? What are my options? And here's what he comes up with. The Suez Canal, which was built 90 years earlier, was built with Egyptian labor. It was Egyptian workforce. Tens of thousands of Egyptians died building the Suez Canal. Egyptian labor built this thing. But it was funded by French banks and English banks that Egypt was forced to take a loan for. So who was going to benefit from the Suez Canal? France and Great Britain, because they could send their goods through the Suez Canal from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean.
Finally, South Africa. That was the jackpot of diamonds and gold. The British fought the Boers for South Africa. But one thing remained, that the black South Africans should remain the labor force. Even till date, there is a part of South Africa that is restricted for only the whites.
Oh, there were no Africans that were native. There was a few, but not really. It wasn't inhabited because it was too cold down there for them.
Mm-hmm.
And
South Africa,
yeah. So when the white people went there, the British went there, they built something out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And they had apartheid because they were getting attacked.
Let's break it down. Before a single European ship docked at the Cape, South Africa was home to millions of people. You had the San people, one of the oldest human populations on the entire planet. They had been living in southern Africa for tens of thousands of years. You had the Khoikhoi, skilled pastoralists with cattle, trade, and established communities across the Cape region. You had the powerful Bantu-speaking nations like the Zulu, the Xhosa, the Sotho, the Tswana, with kingdoms, governments, and economies that were thriving long before Europe even knew this land existed. Let's not forget, y'all thought y'all were going to India and ended up in Africa. So where did the empty land story come from? It was invented, deliberately, a lie. Colonizers needed a legal and moral excuse to take land that wasn't theirs. They tell the same lie about Europeans settling in America, saying that there was virtually no one here when there were millions of natives here.
The British maintain a massive influence on most of these African countries. Their influence ensures that the minerals from Africa still flows to the West.
Who really owns South Africa? Now, to those of you who don't know what the Berlin Declaration is, let me give you a little bit of insight. It was in 1884 where the Berlin Declaration formalized at the Berlin Conference that was an agreement between European states or European powers and Americas to establish rules for colonizing Africa without any African representation.
When the British government left, they left their Commonwealth to keep our presidents in line. They left behind debts for our economy to keep paying and to keep supplying them with our minerals. They left their educational system to be able to chain us around them.
The British were not interested in making us better people. Otherwise, they would not have colonized us. Colonizing somebody is not about helping them, it's about helping yourself. Our educational system was based upon someone else's interests.
When you ask the question, if these countries are still being colonized, you take a look at our educational system, at the manufacturing companies. The question for us today is, now that we know our history, what are we going to do about our future? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section.